With blood, battle, and bravery, they stand stalwart in the face of danger.
Show boldness in the fires of war.
They're the ones who live their life at the blade's edge.
Today we look at the fighter class.
Greetings, heroes. My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes.
On today's episode, we're taking a look at the fighter class in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, one of the most versatile classes in the game.
Yes, the fighter is the classic martial warrior. They are at the front lines of battle. They are one of the oldest and most archetypal classes in both mythology and the Dungeons & Dragons game.
So we're going to get you inspired by taking an in-depth look at the build options and role-playing options for the fighter class so that you can charge headfirst into battle. Yeah, so first question, why would we want to play a fighter?
Well, the fighter is the big damn hero of Dungeons & Dragons. And there is so much in terms of both real-world heroes and our own mythology about legends of heroes that can inspire the fighter in a way that few other classes in D&D can match.
And they're really one of the most courageous classes. If you want to be that guy that's just going to run out and face the horrible things that are coming at them head on and not even flinch, then the fighter's going to be a great class for you. And they're really open-ended in the options that they have for them.
Yeah, the fighters are supremely versatile. Based on the weapons that they use, the armor they wear, and the skills that they have, you can shape your fighter in almost any way that you can imagine. And in the process, you get to feel like a true action hero. The best fighters are brave, perhaps even a little bit foolish, and just a touch maybe too reckless. But they know that they have the skills and the true grit to succeed in battle.
So let's talk about the fighter's role in the party.
Yeah, well, straight up, I think that it's really reductive to think of the fighter like the tank in a video game, because they can be so much more than that. That said, they are tough enough and strong enough to stand at the front lines of battle and take almost anything the worst monsters in Dungeons & Dragons can throw at them.
But because of their versatility, you don't always just have to picture the fighter with a sword and shield running headfirst into battle. You do have options for being the ranged fighter or even a polearm fighter.
A swashbuckler. Because the fighter has ultimate proficiency in all the weapons, they make an excellent damage dealer. And if you really want to come here for the ability to strike down your foes like no other class in the game, the fighter is really where you want to start.
This one seems really obvious and open-ended, but inspiration for a fighter is pretty much everywhere that you look. You can pull from all sorts of different sources to find inspiration for your fighter, including almost every action hero from every action movie that's ever existed. But there's a lot more.
Exactly. Your fighter could be a ruthless mercenary, a cunning swashbuckler. They could be a valiant champion of the people. Or they could even be a ruthless and craven villain. They can go almost anywhere. And this is because, again, we have great heroes from our own stories to inspire us. You can look at figures from English and European mythology like Beowulf and Cuchulainn. You can look at more Mediterranean and Middle Eastern heroes like Hercules and Gilgamesh. And even more beyond that, you can look at almost any culture or society in human history, and you can find their myths and legends, and you will find that undefeatable hero that stands against the darkness, wielding only the sword in their hand, or whatever weapon that happens to be.
If we want to look at comic books, which I always like to do, Captain America is a great example of a fighter class, because a lot of people look at the fighter class and they say, well, they're not magical in any way.
They have no supernatural powers.
Yeah, and if you look at Captain America, no supernatural powers. He's just a guy that's been given the abilities of the perfect human being. And that gives him that ability to jump really far and lift really heavy objects and smash people with a shield.
Yeah, and fighters should be the ones that are capable of great feats of strength, daring. If not the fighter, who else is capable of filling that role in Dungeons and Dragons? And I think that especially Captain America is a great example of the type of resilience that fighters ought to have. I think other great examples of fantastic fighters that are super tough and have amazing moves are characters like Xena, the warrior princess. Even Wonder Woman, although she has some pretty supernatural abilities, but at her core, she's a fighter, right? I even think of like other mythological figures like Boudica. Of course, in the Forgotten Realms, I think the archetypal examples are Brunner Battlehammer and Canterbury. But we would be remiss to not mention our Lord of the Rings examples.
Which is Boromir, who is a pretty essential fighter with his sword and shield.
Yep.
And who's our other one?
I think Gimli and Legolas
Right, Gimli
are both
and Legolas.
best described as straight-up fighters.
And if you want to look at a ranged fighter, Legolas is actually, in most ways, a fighter, which fighters can take the option to use a bow, and Legolas is a great example of that.
Yeah, other kind of more interesting characters that you could base on, I like to think of Mulan from the Disney movie. She's a really interesting character of someone that came from a completely different background, learned to fight, and showed bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. I also like, we've had a discussion about this, but we personally kind of think that Link from The Legend of Zelda is pretty much just a fighter with a whole bunch of cool magic items.
Yeah, you can argue a lot of different options there, but most of his other things come from the magic items he has. At his core elements, he's a guy with a sword and shield who's really strong and faces evil with extreme bravery.
And that was actually like the defining thing of the fight. Like fighters are so often defined by that iconic weapon. Like I'm thinking of the Master Sword or Thor's hammer or Excalibur or something like that. And for a lot of the time in D&D, what made fighters so special was the fact that they could wield powerful magical weapons. So it's an even cool way to get inspired about, what kind of weapons and armor and equipment does your fighter wear? What kinds of ideas can you find from that? Now that we've gotten inspired, let's get into thinking about how we can actually build our fighter. Now, the fighter has a great advantage amongst all the classes in Dungeons & Dragons because they are really, really straightforward overall, and they're a great class for new players that are still getting used to the mechanics of rolling a 20-sided die. Because there's not a lot of extra rules beyond the most basic rules of the game that you need to keep in your head.
Now, one of the first things we want to talk about is ability scores. Now, because of the versatility of fighters, you're probably going to want to look at one of two, depending on the type of fighter you want to be. And those are strength or dexterity.
Yeah, strength is going to be ideal if you want to focus on heavy armor, heavy weapons, and particularly two-handed weapons like greatswords, mauls, and two-handed axes.
On the flip side of that, though, you can be a very dexterous fighter who uses finesse weapons or ranged weapons and is a little bit more light armor and kind of dodges around the battlefield.
Regardless of whether you choose to go with strength or dexterity, the one that you don't pick, you probably won't want to invest too much into because they're kind of mutually exclusive. But both are really going to want to focus on their constitution scores.
Yeah, just to get your ability to take that damage up even higher.
Yeah, you have a D10 hit die, which is the second highest amongst the classes in the entire game. Combining that with a really high constitution score means that you can be the type of fighter that gets hit with a disintegrate spell and survives.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, I mean, you're probably not going to be the smartest person on the battlefield or the most charismatic. Really, it comes down
and you
to...
kind of have to not have a lot of common sense to want to go into the environments that fighters find themselves in. So, in general, fighters are going to find themselves with pretty low intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores, and you're going to have to make the best of that. Remember, just because your fighter isn't intelligent doesn't mean they're dumber than a sack of bricks.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily need to be rude or uncouth. But I do find that the great way to roleplay having a lower intelligence and charisma score is to be a very direct action-packed, and almost using that impatience and foolhardy bravery as a way of still being able to be a larger-than-life character.
So which races work best for the fighter?
Almost all of them.
Yeah, I mean, really, the fighter's, once again, such an open class. I personally, we say this every time, but the variant human is a great option.
Yeah, and especially because fighters really get a lot out of feats, and kickstarting that expertise with a free feat at first level really, really helps. That said, humans have some competition here from, I think, both the mountain dwarves and half-orcs. Especially if you want to be a melee fighter, because half-orcs and mountain dwarves, as well as dragonborn, all get +2 strength right off the bat. And the extra resilience traits that both the half-orcs and the mountain dwarves get in the form of bonus constitution and all other little ways that make them tougher, like the dwarves' poison resistance and the half-orcs' ability to get back up when reduced to 0 hit points, just makes them fantastically tough fighters.
Yeah, but you can also play, there's a few races that would be better if you're playing a ranged fighter as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would you recommend for a ranged fighter?
Well, the wood elves are actually pretty decent for if you want to get some dexterity going on there.
Because they get +2 to their dex. The extra proficiencies don't help you, but dark vision is pretty key.
Yeah.
And some extra skill proficiencies and movement-related features, because you will want to be quite nimble as an archer. I would also recommend Lightfoot halflings or Strongheart halflings. Those also get +2 dex. And beyond that, you can almost make anything in the player's handbook work. There's nothing that's going to be especially bad for you, except for maybe tieflings.
Yeah.
Half-elves, meh.
Although, I mean, honestly, if you really want to, they can still work. And from Volo's Guide to Monsters, once again, there's a lot of great options in there as well.
The
Goliath would make a really strong fighter.
Yeah, and if your DM will let you, an Aarakocra to be able to fly right away.
Yeah.
And the Tabaxi is a pretty good ranged one with, again, another +2 dex class. It's always a strong contender when you see any of those races that get a +2 to strength or dexterity.
So let's talk about some of the proficiencies for the fighting class.
Well, you get every single piece of weapon and armor in the game.
Yeah, you really get to pick and choose here what type of weapon and what type of armor you want to use, and there's no limit to that. You can use pretty much anything.
Yeah, I think probably in general, you're either going to want to go right for the heaviest armor you can find, or strap on a suit of studded leather armor if you're going the dexterity route. And then at that point, you really you can wield any weapon, and there's no reason not to stock up and bring a couple with you to the battlefield, and really take advantage of that flexibility that you have by being proficient with every weapon in the game. Beyond that, saving throws.
Saving throws, they get...
strength and constitution.
Strength and constitution, which strength doesn't come up too much. Constitution can come up once in a while, though, so it's a good one.
You're going to be tough as nails.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for skill proficiencies, again, fighters don't get too many skill proficiencies as a whole, but I do think most fighters are going to want to take proficiency in athletics or acrobatics at the very least.
Yeah.
Because that's really going to help you make those amazing feats of strength, athleticism, and kind of flipping around the battlefield, climbing up walls, swimming, and doing all that amazing stuff that fighters are known for.
From there, I mean, the skills that you pick is really up to you and the way you want to play your character.
Yeah.
It's really more of a role-playing option at that point. So the fighter benefits from a number of different fighting styles that they can choose from, and this is where you're really going to define the type of fighter you want to be.
Yeah, your choice of weapon is a big deal. Your weapon is your best friend. For some of you, it might be your only friend.
When we look at the different fighting styles, what weapon did you pick? If you're going to be a ranged fighter who uses a bow, you're going to want to pick the archery option.
Which is super powerful because it's one of the only ways to get a bonus to hit beyond your proficiency.
Yeah, it's a +2 to hit with ranged weapons. So there's also the defense option, which allows you to add a +1 to your AC if you're wearing armor.
This is a pretty good choice if you really don't want to commit to any style of weaponry.
Yeah.
The other one that's good for if you want to be a protector, is going to be that style, because you'll then have the ability to impose disadvantage on attacks made against your allies as a reaction, as long as you're carrying a shield.
Now, if you've made the choice of holding a big two-handed sword, there's great weapon fighting,
Which will let you reroll those annoying 1s and 2s on damage dice.
which can be very powerful for a character that's going to smash things.
Now, if you want to use one weapon only in one hand, there's the dueling style, which gives you a +2 bonus to damage rolls made with one-handed weapons when you have no other weapon in your offhand. But incidentally, this still works if you're using a shield.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And if you have a weapon in both hands,
Then you use two-weapon fighting.
two-weapon fighting. One of the main abilities that you're going to get as a fighter at level 2 is Action Surge, which is a really cool ability that gives you a full extra action on your turn.
There's so many things that you can do with this, and it's probably one of the most defining and iconic features of the fighter. It's really what makes you an action hero. Now, there's a few things to bear in mind with Action Surge. Action Surge does not give you an entire extra turn. You're still restricted by the normal amount of movement that you have on your turn when you use it. You don't get an additional bonus action, and you don't get an additional reaction. However, once you gain a couple levels, and you get the extra attack class feature, which allows you to attack twice, and eventually 3 times, and eventually 4 times. If you use Action Surge and attack using your surged action, and then use the attack action as your regular action, you're effectively doubling the number of attacks you get to make. This means that a 5th level fighter that uses both their Action Surge action and their main action to attack makes 4 attacks, and a 20th level fighter makes 8. You are a blender in human form. Basically, if you want to kill everything in front of you, use Action Surge. And the amount of damage that this deals is absolutely staggering. DMs, you need to actually watch out for this one, because the fighter will kill that thing, and it will only survive 1 round.
Yes, your big, bad, evil guy will not stand up toe-to-toe with a fighter that has 8 attacks on its turn most of the time.
No.
So speaking of really cool abilities that the fighter gets, what about Second Wind?
Bonus action, heal yourself. Recharges on a short rest.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, both Action Surge and Second Wind recharge on short rest, which means that you'll have them many, many times throughout the day. And you can keep yourself alive in a desperate situation using Second Wind.
So deal tons of damage and heal yourself. And then take a little rest and go again, and just repeat until everything dies in the whole world.
It's a huge advantage of the fighter. You don't have to worry about running out of sword swings. You might have to worry about running out of arrows.
I suppose. And next we get to feats, which if you're playing a fighter, you better like feats.
Yeah, the fighter is really unique, because unlike most classes that get 5 ability score increases or feats, the fighter gets 7. Getting an extra ability score increase happening at level 6, and again at level 10. This is a gigantic advantage.
Yeah, it means that if you're playing with feats, you get a lot more options for how you want to customize your fighter. If you are playing with just increasing your ability scores, you can max out a lot of ability scores throughout the entire time you're using your fighter.
So the first ones that we want to talk about are Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter, because these are the feats that really make fighters incredible damage dealers.
Yeah, and really the difference there is whether or not, again, you're playing a melee fighter or a ranged fighter. Both of these do something similar, but one is for ranged, one is for melee.
Yeah, in both cases, the feat allows you to take a -5 penalty to your attack roll in exchange for a +10 bonus to the damage roll. I don't know if you were counting from before, but a fighter making 8 attacks means that's 80 damage.
Minimum.
Which is crazy, actually, plus the die roll. So
Plus
you're
the
looking
die
at
roll,
like 88 damage minimum, plus their ability modifier. So we're already up to well over 100 points of damage from a 20th level fighter. This is absolutely bonkers. And so I think most fighters are going to pick up 1 or 2 of these feats. It really means that the two-handed weapons and the ranged weapons are the dominant styles for most fighters.
And in case you're worried about like, oh, -5 to hit, that sounds deadly, I assure you it pays off if you just use it a whole bunch. you're going to hit, and when you do, that extra 10 damage feels really nice.
And fighters have a lot of interesting tricks and strategies to give themselves advantage. For example, you can simply replace one of your attacks with the shove action to kick somebody prone, and then that remaining 7 attacks all have advantage. Now, the next ones that we're going to talk about are 2 related ones as well, which are Polearm Master and Crossbow Expert. These drive a little bit of a deeper specialization because you actually have to use either a weapon with reach or a polearm, or a crossbow weapon in order to benefit from them. Specifically with the case of Crossbow Expert, you actually need to use a hand crossbow.
But if you do get your hands on a hand crossbow...
Or a polearm.
Or a polearm, taking these feats can make your fighter extremely deadly.
Because both of these feats give you the ability to make 1 extra attack as a bonus action using your polearm or your hand crossbow, respectively, as long as you've used your main action to attack with that weapon already. Because these feats come online very early and they work every round, if you're a level 6 fighter, you've got 3 attacks per round, boost that up to 5 with Action Surge, you can really make a lot of damage happen very, very quickly. And this really is what makes the fighter such a powerful class. If you're not interested in blowing the doors off of every single encounter by dealing the most damage possible, there's a few other feats that you might want to consider, like Sentinel and Shield Master.
Sentinel pairs very well with the Polearm Master, so if you are using that polearm, try looking at how those two combine. It can be a really cool combination.
It makes you really tough to get away from, because Polearm Master also has the benefit that when an enemy comes into your reach, you get a free strike against them with an opportunity attack reaction. And then at that point, they actually stop moving because of Sentinel. And it means that your foes can't disengage from you without also getting attacked because you have the Sentinel feat.
Also, the Sentinel feat makes it so that if you're standing next to somebody and an enemy attacks them and not you, you can use your reaction to attack them.
Yeah, it's really, really potent.
Yeah.
Shield Master gives you a couple extra options with using a shield, such as the ability to knock people prone and attack with your shield. And a few other ones that are worth looking at would be ones like Warcaster, if you're planning on going as an Eldritch Knight, or even feats like Durable, Inspiring Leader. You have so many opportunities to take extra feats. I find most fighters are probably going to go right for Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter and then build up from there. But it's really worth having a look over at all the other feats in the player's handbook, because if there's one place where you get to explore the most of them, it's the fighter class.
So let's talk about some of the martial archetypes for the fighter.
Yeah, when you get to level 3, your fighter will be able to select their martial archetype. And the player's handbook lists 3 core archetypes, and these are going to really give you an extra set of tools that are going to augment your fighter's capabilities. I find that, again, the martial archetype is a pretty small amount of the overall package of the fighter, but they're all really, really cool.
So the first one we're going to look at is the champion, which is the very straightforward way to run a fighter.
Yeah, as a champion, there's not a lot of choices that you have to make, in contrast to the other 2 archetypes, which have a lot of choices. So the champion is a great archetype for a first-time player that just wants something very, very simple and doesn't want to have to worry about too much with character building.
Yeah, and one of the great benefits of running the champion is you get to crit on a 19 or 20, and then later on an 18, 19, or 20.
Yeah, at very high levels of play, you'll also get an additional fighting style, so you get to pick 2 of the fighting styles we discussed earlier, and the ability to regenerate your hit points when you're reduced to less than half of your total.
So if you want something where you don't really have to worry about filling in a whole bunch of blanks, but you just want a fighter that's going to destroy things and be able to crit a whole bunch and stay alive, the champion's a great choice. After that, we have the Battle Master, which is my personal favorite.
Yeah, I think by far the Battle Master is the most popular of the fighter options. The main reason being is that you get this huge array of choices in the form of maneuvers.
Yeah, and maneuvers to me are kind of like the little version of spells, where it gives me things to choose and look at and say what's going to be best in this situation.
Yeah, it's quite flexible.
I do kind of like that. And it also really feels very swashbucklery to me, like with the ability to like trip people or like riposte or shove them over, like just kind of more more tactical than just smashing things with a sword.
Yeah, as a battle master, you'll get this special feature called superiority dice, which is a special pool of dice. They start off as d8s, but they eventually get a little bit higher than that. And whenever you make an attack or hit with an attack, it depends on the specific maneuver, you can spend one of these dice to add an additional effect. What's important to note is that these superiority dice refresh whenever you finish a short or long rest, so they're almost always available to you. And oftentimes your maneuvers will also impose a saving throw, which is calculated as 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your choice of your strength or dexterity modifier. Generally, the d8 that you spend is also added to the damage, so it's a nice little damage boost. What are some of your favorite maneuvers, Kelly?
Riposte is one of my all-time favorites,
it's a
and I
good
don't
one.
see why you wouldn't take it. It's if somebody misses you when they attack, you get to immediately use your reaction to attack them.
Yeah, this is really great when combined with a polearm master because it gives you so many ways to attack with your reaction.
Yeah.
I also really like trip attack because as we mentioned earlier, knocking someone prone gives your melee attacks advantage against them, and having trip attack lets you do this without giving up the damage of your first attack either. So it's a really great move is to trip someone and then finish them off with a bunch of advantage-based attacks. I also really like menacing attack.
Yeah.
Because this one works. This one works with ranged attacks too. In fact, almost all of the maneuvers work whether you're going in melee or range. There's only a few that are melee only. Pushing attack is really good too for controlling the battlefield. I also really like maneuvering attack and commander's strike if you want to be more of a leader or a warlord type character.
The last archetype that we're going to talk about is the Eldritch Knight, which mixes a little bit of magic in with your fighter.
Yeah, if you're going to play an Eldritch Knight, you might want to invest a little bit in your intelligence score or find a headband of intellect because you're going to be casting arcane spells. You get to select spells from the wizard spell list, but you're only ever going to learn up to 4th level spells. So you get this extra little progression and a small number of specific spells that you know, as well as a few cantrips. What I really like about the Eldritch Knight is that you get to choose from the wizard list, but only evocation or abjuration spells, which happen to be 2 of the best schools of magic. But you once in a while get to pick a spell from any school as well.
Yeah, and this just adds a little bit of extra flavor. If you want to play a character that can smash things, but you just want to have that extra ability of spellcasting, this is a great way to go. It kind of mixes the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but you also get powerful options like being able to take the shield spell for +5 AC to make you an even more potent defender. Or you can even imagine your fighter as a mage slayer and take counterspell and the mage slayer feat, and then you are a terror to witches, wizards, and other nefarious agents of evil black magic. And I think also there's something to be said for just being able to be like, yeah, you think I've just got this sword and shield? Well, guess what? Fireball. Because action heroes are super cool guys, and what is an action hero without an amazing sequence of Michael Bay style explosions?
And then they have to turn away and walk away from it in slow motion.
Exactly. Now that we've looked at all the different ways that you can build your fighter and really end up as the ultimate master of the battlefield, how are you going to roleplay your hero?
Well, you want to be the action hero. That's for sure.
I think so. I think the first place I would start off with as a fighter is making sure I am well versed in action hero style one-liners.
Yeah, you need a good list of one-liners to yell out right before you kill every enemy, and you're going to be killing a lot of enemies.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question in all that too is, in the midst of all this killing, what is your fighter fighting for? Every action hero has like that overly dramatic, like lifelong regret, the dead wife, or the child that's missing, or the friend that they lost in battle, and they're trying to like find themselves again.
I've got a special set of skills.
Yeah. Exactly, right? And so having that motivation, like, and you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be the dark and cheesy action hero style. Going back to Captain America, he just loves his nation, right? And he has a very clear set of ideals and principles, and he is willing to fight for those ideals and principles. Not in the same way as a paladin does. It's not the same as having like a divine quest, right? It's about having your principles and quite literally sticking to your guns.
Yeah.
Right? I also think that fighters are an awesome way to, like, you know, have your signature move or name your weapon, right? Maybe even your fighter has a cool nickname themselves. And based on their deeds, right? Like, maybe your fighter is the Slayer of the Manticore! Or, like, some sort... And, like, they actually have skinned one of the beasts that they've slain and they wear it as a cloak. Or their sword is engraved in the likeness of one of the monsters they've slain.
Yeah, go all out when you're creating your action hero fighter.
Yeah.
Make them larger than life. Make them extreme. And just have fun with it. Let them run around punching the biggest monster they can find in the face and not even caring about it.
Yeah, the fighter really should be your opportunity to do all those foolishly brave, amazing stunts that you've seen all of your favorite action heroes and legends do. There's no room to be a coward when you're playing a fighter. You've got to see what you want to get. Like, immortality is right in front of you. Are you going to take it?
Probably.
Right? Do you want to live forever?
Yes.
You're not going to if you're playing a fighter. You're going to die a pretty grisly death. But it's going to be awesome.
So this has been our class guide on the fighter. We hope that you feel inspired and you're ready to go punch a Demogorgon in the face.
Take charge, take heed, and I wish you great fortune in the wars to come. Now, of course, I'd also love to hear about the epic heroics of your fighters in your campaigns at home. And if you have any ideas about character advice or build tips, or you just want to share your favorite badass one-liner, we would love to hear about that down in the comments.
And if you're looking for hints and tips to create a truly awesome character, we do have a video guide on that right over here.
And of course, we review all the cool actions that you can take in combat in this video right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
In the dungeon.